It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
My personality is I want to win badly. I want to win more Lombardis for Philadelphia and our fans. We got the greatest fans around, and I will do everything possible.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you locally by Dr. Lyle M. Beck. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelyle.com. Call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Beck, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is with me today. I think I see a blank screen, but I'm going to take a chance and assume that he's there. Jeffrey, how are you?
I'm here. I'm not sure why my screen is blank, though. Is that on my end or yours?
That's on your end. You are just You're just a blank screen. But I do hear you. You sound fine.
Hold on. I realize what happened here.
Do you have like
Okay. Sometimes you got to flip that webcam thing up and
right. The camera was facing the wrong way.
Indeed it was.
Indeed you do. So what's
How's your vacation? Did you have a good time?
I did have a nice time, except for the day I was walking down the street and I got an alert on my phone that essentially said the Eagles have traded the 6th pick. And I was like, well, here we go. So let's get to your initial reaction, because you weren't on Friday's show. That was Adam Kaplan. Now that the dust has settled, it seems like there's some little information coming out about why the Eagles maybe entrepreneured this type of deal. But moving from 6 to 12, initial reaction from you.
Yeah, it was my first reaction was surprise. Obviously, I didn't think that they would want to be in the market to move down right off the bat. I have said to you on the show that this is a weird draft for them because the caliber of talent available where they pick, it's where they were going to pick, is not necessarily what they tend to look for when they're picking in the top 10. I mean, they've only done it, I think, 4 times in the last 20, 25 years, and it's been 2 offensive linemen, right? Trey Thomas and Lane Johnson, and 2 quarterbacks, Carson Wentz and Donovan McNabb. And if I'm missing somebody, you can tell me, but maybe Corey Simon. I don't remember if he was top 10, but the bottom line is they generally look for offensive linemen, defensive linemen, or quarterback. And it didn't seem at 6 like the only that would align with their values. Maybe Penei Sewell would have been there, but maybe not. And so, look, Mike, the big thing I did was research it from an analytics standpoint. And I talked to someone I know who does analytics projects for both the NFL and college teams. And he's very well aware of the value chart. And I asked him what he thought of this trade from a value-only standpoint. And he said the trade is equitable value. And so then it becomes, Mike, whether it's almost like how Howie says chocolate or vanilla, right? Do you want the upper echelon blue chip type playmaker, or at least the better odds of it? Or do you want to get more assets and add to more? So I don't know that there's a right or wrong right now. It all depends on how you draft. I know some people were real stuck in on getting either Chase or Pitts, and that's a disappointment for them. It does put a little bit of pressure right on the Eagles now at 12 or wherever they draft. I don't think they're done, to be honest, but to make sure that they hit. But there's pressure to make sure you hit anyway.
By the way, not according to Ryan Wilson's mock draft at CBS Sports, who has the Eagles landing Kyle Pitts with number 12.
Well, that would be some incredible foresight there by Howie. I know some people think that Howie traded down because he knows he can get a specific prospect at 12. And I always say, when you got 11 teams picking ahead of you, you don't know anything. Yeah. I mean, you may know that quarterbacks are going to take up a couple of numbers, but you just can't ever know anything.
Well, what do you make of the notion Albert Breer wrote today in his MMQB that essentially the Eagles knew that the Bengals were going to take Chase, and that's who they wanted. So when they knew that, they decided to move back.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that remains to be seen. Of course, every team tries to do intel, and every team plays gamesmanship, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals didn't take an offensive lineman, because they need one so badly. It would be such a Bengals thing to do to not take an offensive lineman and go after the playmaker. Plus, Chase played with the quarterback, Joe Burrow. Yep. So I'm sure that there's some good connection there. So it would not shock me. But if that were be the case, I think you can make an argument then of taking Penei Sewell there, assuming that he's available if Pitts and Chase go go there. But the Eagles clearly have opted then to move down and add assets. And again, I'm not 100% sold that they're done. I just think that there's
Meaning
too many
what?
weeks here.
Not sold, done on what? Moving up, moving back again?
Yeah, no, I don't know if they want to move down any further. I wouldn't slam the door on it, but I wouldn't slam the door on them moving up again.
So from 12 back up to, say, 8.
Sure.
Gotcha.
Sure. I also wouldn't slam the door on, packaging up these trades and seeing if a quarterback that they like isn't available,
All right, let's take Roseman and the hatred that people have for him out of this because, okay, they make this trade, and, of course, the guy who hates Roseman would say he's going to mess the picks up anyway. So I don't care that I got a first-round pick next year. They don't trust the guy drafting, which is fine to have that opinion. Take that out of the equation. I don't know how you don't like this deal if you're Philadelphia, though. You get the 12th pick, and now you have possibly 3 next year, which you could utilize to do more either this year or next year. You could get yourself in play for a veteran quarterback, a Russell Wilson, a Watson, depending on what happens with that whole mess of a story that I don't even know where to start or begin with that or end with that thing. But
right.
I don't see a way that you say, well, I really don't like what they did here, other than you just simply don't like the guy making the picks and don't trust that he's going to get them right.
Well, I would add to that I agree with you that there's definitely benefits to doing what they did, and you can probably make an equal number of pros for both scenarios. But I'm not going to just sit here and say that if you wanted the Eagles to say it's 6, it's because you're right now you're mad at Howie Roseman. I think it is definitely goes without saying that when you pick at 6, you have a much better chance of landing an elite playmaker, which the Eagles really don't have. So I can understand the philosophy of saying, look, this team needs, if you're going to build around Jalen Hurts or somebody else, you still need to give this guy an elite playmaker. And even bad teams that have picked 6 overall, like bad draft, like say the Jets, I think they picked Jamal Adams 6 overall a couple of years ago, right? They have historically not been a great drafting team, but they were almost in a foolproof situation where they were going to get a great player there.
Well, and I would also, we talked about this earlier, Jeff. I want to get your take on it to kind of add to the conversation. You might draft Jamar Chase at number 6, and he might be great, but I can't think of a wide receiver who has come into a bad team and changed the fortunes of that. Like Odell Beckham was a great player. They got him at number 12, by the way. Mm-hmm. He didn't change the Giants' fortunes. They still stunk with him. So just getting this wide receiver who's this great player at 6 isn't going to change the dynamics of your franchise. It might make your offense better, and it might help that. But getting the extra picks, and they got a 4th-round pick in this draft, which they lost in that Avery trade that I don't think has been brought up, so they recaptured that. Mm-hmm. To add the multiple picks to go to 12, to me, gives you more chances to get more players. That's why I like it, because just getting a guy at 6, he might be great. He might be Jamal Adams, who's tremendous. But that guy's not changing the franchise.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but that's almost a way of advocating not taking anybody ever at 6 unless it's a quarterback. And I don't know that that's a good comparison either. I mean, the Indianapolis Colts, I think, took Quentin Nelson at 6, and he has been a fantastic part of their turnaround.
Yeah, but that was a player
responsible for it.
That was a team that was right there, but their line was so bad. Right. That he was an impactful player. You don't look at a lineman as an impactful player, but he was because they were so deficient there.
Right. That's why I can buy you on maybe Jamar Chase doesn't change them as good as he is all, but an offensive lineman like Penei Sewell, or if in this case there was a pass rusher, which there's not, but so let's stay with Sewell, that would have been a good, theoretically, a good idea, a good pick, a good way to really rebuild in a way that you value and fits your identity. So I hear what you're saying, and certainly there is a dubious history of teams picking in the top 10, taking wide receivers, and it really not making an immediate impact. But, like Mike Evans went in the top 10, and I don't know that the Bucs win the Super Bowl without him. So
no, but I will say that I brought him up. I'm glad you brought him up. Is they got him at number 7. Mm-hmm. It didn't change Tampa Bay until they got Brady.
Well, I don't think that's what I'm saying. I don't think any one player other than a quarterback chosen top 10 really changes you dramatically or spins you upside down. But again, if you're a good franchise like the Colts are, like the Eagles were in the 2000s, and you can use that guy when they drafted Lane Johnson as a good example, because the Eagles aren't a terrible team. Like, they're not good, but they have guys like Miles. Their offensive line's pretty good. It's got Jason Kelce. When healthy, it's good. So you've got. I don't know if this is like the year that Chip Kelly took over for Andy Reid and was able to have Shady and Jason Peters. I mean, that was a talented team. LaShawn Jackson, LaShawn McCoy, Jeremy Maclin. That team had talent. This team doesn't have as much talent, but they're not completely bare in the cupboard of talent. Their lines are pretty good.
I feel like the one guy saying, look, their offensive line, if it's healthy, you can win games with that offensive line. They were, to me, very deficient on defense. Where do you think Anthony Harris has left in the tank?
He's not an old player. He's 29. He'll be 30 during the season. He's the type of player who's played predominantly deep safety in a cover two. And so it's funny to watch tape on a guy who plays deep half in a cover two. It's not very exciting a lot of times. I mean, unless the ball is thrown in your direction and thrown over your head, there's not a whole lot of action. And even against the run, right? You're coming from so far that by the time you get into the box, the tackles have been made a lot. So I would say there's not a lot of wear and tear on him as there is a guy like Malcolm Jenkins who plays 1,000 snaps and comes into the box and tackles and covers slot receiver. So I think it's a sensible signing because the guy knows the defense, and I think he's got
is there
3 or 4 years ahead of him.
Is there any insight on what type of defense they might play that they brought him in? Because there's two things that stood out to me about Harris. One, he had 9 interceptions in 2 years, not a lot of tackles. Last year, he had 104 tackles playing the safety position. In 2 years before that, he didn't come close to 100 tackles, and he had 0 picks last year. So he was a playmaking guy, as you mentioned, deep ball hawk guy, back end. Last year, no picks, a lot of tackles. The 2 previous years, 9 picks, not a lot of tackles. I found that to be kind of interesting when watching him.
Well, that's in large part due to the fact that Mike Zimmer has changed some things with his scheme. I mean, for example, last year they play a ton of cover 2, and Harrison Smith, who was normally their deep post safety, was the guy that's up in the box and doing a lot more around the line of scrimmage because he's just a really good player who's versatile like that, kind of like Malcolm Jenkins was, and they wanted to use him more as a spark plug. If you go back 2 years ago, why Anthony Harris had a lot of interceptions is that he's
6, by the way.
He's not the great,
2 years ago he had 6. The year before that he had 3.
Right. So 2 years ago, he was a guy who put himself in the right position a lot of times. I mean, he's not necessarily a ball hawk like a Jarius Byrd used to be, but he's got good instincts and he's smart. And he knows how to jump a route so that when you're playing that deep position and they try to run that route in front of you, he's smart enough to be able to pick it off. And also 2 years ago, the Vikings were a lot better at getting a pass rush, and they had a much better defense. Last year, they were thrown on a little bit underneath the middle, and that's why you see he was able to come up and make a bunch of tackles. He's not an elite athlete per se. He's a good athlete. So he's like a good signing. He's not going to be great. I doubt he's going to make the All-Pro team. Probably won't be a Pro Bowler, but he fills a hole that the Eagles had there next to Rodney McLeod.
Yeah, I like the deal. 1 year, $5 million. I mean, to me, they finally got a player in that secondary that you're like, all right, because they looked disastrous when they lost Mills. They still need to fix corner. We go back to this draft now because moving to 12, Geoff, I know that you have been very, not against, but just laughing at the idea that they might think of a linebacker. But at 12, this might be the one time that you could say, hey, I could see it actually happen. You move back to 12, that player is maybe the best player on if you're going by best player available and he's there at 12, he might actually fit that moniker.
I don't see it happening. I'll maintain that. If you gave me a list of 7 players, I'd probably rank him 7th. I think cornerback at that position. I think the Michigan pass rusher, Kwity Paye. I hope I pronounced his name. Yeah, I can see J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain. I can see Kwity Paye. I can see maybe one of the offensive linemen if he's able to fall there, like a Slater or the kid from maybe Vera Tucker from
Vera
USC.
Tucker, yeah.
I just doubt that they would take Micah Parsons there.
All right. Well, I mean, at least we could dream, right? Because if
well, the one thing I don't know is how much influence Gannon will have on these decisions and whether or not his defense he will be predicated on having a versatile player like that.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Kind of a hybrid.
We seemed to touch on it a couple of questions ago about did the Harris signing give you any insight on what type of defense the Eagles might employ?
Yeah, so from what I understand, they are going to do a lot of what Mike Zimmer does. There's going to be a lot of cover 2. There'll be some cover 3 mixed in. They are going to be here's where I think they're going. I sense from what I hear that they'll be different in a Jim Schwartz way. They're going to be more active up front with their linemen. They're going to have more guys moving around. You know how Jim was very much, I got my 4 pass rushers and they stay in their rush lanes and we go attack the quarterback. We attack the run on the way to the quarterback. But
Yep.
I think you'll see more stunting, more looping, what's called line games. You're going to see that a little bit more. So I don't know that that's going to change the type of athlete that they're looking at, but certainly they're going to look for defensive linemen who have that, flexibility, that lateral movement, fleet of foot, which is what they generally tend to look at anyway, but burst. But you'll see that more. And then, of course, for the linebackers, Mike, if you're going to play a lot of cover 2, you're going to need one. If you're going to have 2 safeties deep, you're going to have to stop the run with 6 if you're in your nickel instead of 7 with that extra safety. So you're going to need a linebacker who's pretty good against the run, like a thumper, which might be Alex Singleton. He stood out. But your other guy is going to have to know how to drop back and take the right depths in the drop and have really good spatial awareness. And I don't think that that's a guy that they have right now.
Yeah, I guess Edwards is the other guy. I mean, I would almost reverse those two if you look at it and say Edwards is the thumper run stuffer, and Singleton would be the guy who I know Singleton had a good year tackling last year, but I would almost look at him.
I don't trust him dropping back too much, though. I think Singleton is a very good sideline to sideline player, downhill player, very a lot like Edwards, maybe a little bit more athletic than Edwards, but I don't think either of them are well versed in, and you saw that at times last year in zone coverage, they would get picked apart.
Yeah, I guess you look at the Singleton dropping back against San Francisco like a tight end, picking that off and taking it to the house, and then you got the 2 guys they drafted last year, Sean Bradley and of course Davion Taylor. That who knows, maybe one of those guys comes back this year and is just, but there's no question that spot is still a glaring need for them, right? And probably between corner and that spot, almost the 2 most glaring spots, even ahead of wide receiver, even though everybody would rather the wide receiver.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. Linebacker, outside corner, the Eagles are very deficient there. Obviously, after Darius Slay, I don't know who would line up outside, especially if you're going to move Avonte Maddox into the slot. And linebacker, they absolutely need some good, young, talented, athletic linebackers. And as I've said, if you're not going to value it in free agency or in the first round of the draft, time to start using some high second-round picks on those kind of guys.
Well, and Jeff, this is, interestingly enough, as you mentioned, they have a plethora they have 11 picks in this draft, right? So this might be the type of year where they do say, all right, we'll do it in the second round. They get that where they have 2/3, and they end up getting a 4th that they did not have. That was from the Jannard Avery trade, if I'm correct there, right?
Yeah.
So they get the 4th for the Avery trade back in this deal with Miami. They have 2/3. I would imagine they got to take a linebacker between the second, the 2/3, and now the 4th.
Yeah, I mean,
Although we forgot about Avery himself. We didn't include him in the conversation.
About who?
Avery himself as a linebacker now.
Right, correct. But we say that, but I've also been saying that about safety for about 8 years now. Like they've got to at some point dedicate a first or a second round pick to a safety, especially the way the game is changed and you see these playmaking safeties. But somehow they always seem to not do that either. But I have a feeling they will address linebacker pretty high in the draft. Day 2 especially, and then this will be the year again that they continue to overlook safety.
All right, yes, maybe. They took Kayvon Wallace last year. I don't know that we think he can play, but Eagles are loaded with picks in this year and now next year's draft as well. So more on the draft, and as Jeff kind of mentioned, don't rule out 2 things. Possibility of moving up, this is interesting, Jeff, because on draft night you've got Dallas, New York, and Philly drafting 10, 11, and 12. Boom, 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 right there. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Jeff says keep an eye on possibly moving up in front of one of those two teams. And don't forget, these veteran quarterbacks, now they have ammunition to say, hey, is Russell Wilson still available? Because we've got enough to get something done. So keep eyes on that. All right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Jeff, tell everybody what's going on over at Inside the Birds this week.
Well, tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., we're going to have the first episode of Inside the Draft with Greg Cosell dropping. So look for that. That's going to be a 6-week installment, with tomorrow being week 1. So 5 weeks every Tuesday, 6 a.m. of previewing the draft. And then the final one will recap the draft. And as you know, Mike, there is nobody better who doesn't work for an NFL team that breaks down prospects and tape from a tape standpoint than Greg Cosell. So we look forward to having him on and dropping the debut show tomorrow morning, 6 a.m.
All right, that's great stuff. Tomorrow, DeCecco's here, talk about the draft. He'll be, I know, rip-roaring ready to talk draft with us tomorrow during Football at 4. Jeff's back on Wednesday, and then, of course, Andrew Thursday, Adam Friday. The Football at 4 guys, powered by Inside the Birds podcast. And make sure you check out today's edition. It dropped at 6 a.m. with Jeff and Adam. All right, pal, I will talk to you soon.
Take care, brother.
All right, he, like all guys, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.